Glad to see you here. My name is Priestess Portals, and I'm the Director of Artistic Innovation and Emergent Magic here at Musical Theater Factory, and you're here for Fast Forward. We're so excited to have you here. This is a new program of ours. This is the only second time that we've ever done a live taping, but really glad to have you here. MTF equips artists to create musical stories as a collective force for justice, healing, and radical imagination. And Fast Forward is an opportunity to invite audiences to explore how musical storytelling can exist beyond just the arts, but can intersect with every sector across society. And the conversation that we're going to be having today is specifically at the intersection of technology, which we're really excited to share with you. I want to be really transparent that we just left a Art Meets Tech conference in Miami. I literally arrived here this afternoon. I was with my fellow artistic innovation lead, Brandon Powers, who is really our XR expert here, and who was the person who conceived this program, MTFXR, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And it was an incredible 5 days of getting to understand the intersection of this form. And as someone who became really new to this work and got introduced to it 4 years ago when I took this position because of Brandon, I'm really excited to open up the conversations and to share all the things that I've learned, but also to invite experts into the conversation and some of our artists who have been playing with these forms. What I'm transparent about is that Brandon was also supposed to be here, and because we flew out from Miami this morning, and we all might have heard what happened at LaGuardia with the airport being shut down, Brandon is stuck in Miami. And so here I am holding down the conversation, but I will say that Brandon is actually right here on my computer, listening in on Zoom. So hi, Brandon. We'll actually even be in dialogue here as we sort of hear what's coming up, and if he's got things he wants to add to the conversation, I'll be looking at the chat to see if there's anything he wants to add. So I just wanted to be really transparent about that. I also want to read a little bit about the artists and the folks we're going to be inviting into space and conversation before we get started. So, to ground this discussion in lived artistic practice, we're going to engage in 2 different case studies tonight. We have EmmaLee Kidwell and Isabella Andreoli, who developed a piece called Come See Your Future, and you're going to get an opportunity to hear a little bit more about that project tonight. It's a mixed reality musical that reimagines how audiences experience narrative across physical and digital space. We've also got Inyosi Sebenzekhaya, formerly known as Nia Witherspoon, who's creating a piece called Priestess Portals. And it's an evolving work exploring how spiritual technologies and extended reality can merge to generate new forms of ritual, of embodiment, of collective transformation. So we're really excited to welcome both of their examples here to spark the conversation. We're also going to be joined by technologist Santiago and researcher Dr. Courtney Cogburnwill, and they'll join the conversation to help audiences better understand how awareness about this intersection can create agency as we imagine how technology can be used to fuel the change that we want to see in the world. So we are here because we understand that theater is an essential form. And as the world starts to become more digital, the value of real people breathing in space and embodying the work feels crucial now more than ever, and will only skyrocket as the spaces continue to become more digital. So we're not here to replace the stage with technology. We're here to use it as a prototype, to enhance the work, and to think about it as a tool for liberation. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about this evening. You know, we've got a program called MTFXR, and when artists hear about this, I think sometimes folks are afraid. You know, where the conversation comes up around like, you know, well, how is technology going to end up stealing our jobs or things like that? And it's healthy to have questions and concerns. And I think this conversation is a little bit about unpacking that and talking a little bit about what our politic here is at MTF, but also the questions that we still have that we're wrestling with. So thank you for sharing that and being honest. I want to take a moment to just frame a little bit about what XR even means. Let's do a little 101 for a second. So XR is an umbrella term for extended reality, which encompasses both augmented reality and virtual reality. So those can be shortened, augmented reality can be shortened to AR or virtual reality VR. So if we think about AR for a second, AR is experiencing digital objects layered on our physical surroundings. So think Pokemon Go, when you saw Pikachu running around on the street just via your phone, or the IKEA app where you're trying to see if a couch fits in your home. That's AR, augmented reality. Then we have VR. And VR is an experience that's fully in virtual space, facilitated by a headset. So this is when you put the headset on, you're in virtual reality. That's an example of that work. So while us at MTF here have mostly been focused on XR and other immersive technologies like spatial sound, 360 sound, the sound coming from everywhere and all different parts of the room, to motion capture and more, we're also understanding that AI is becoming a part of the conversation. And that also requires an incredibly tenuous reckoning that we all must have with this technology. So as we introduce AI into this conversation, it feels important to be really specific about the tools that we're talking about, because XR formats like VR or AR, as well as these other immersive technology tools that we've utilized like motion capture or volumetric capture, are different than, for example, generative AI. So generative AI tools are engines themselves. Yes, they still require a human at the helm prompting them and building with them, but there's a further nuance and complication around how those models are trained, where the data is coming from, and how that output is then affected by other artists' work beyond the artist at the helm. Luckily, we've got an amazing group here that has reckoned with these conversations. And so it's going to be really exciting to understand the distinctions between these forms and what we are saying that we are using here at MTFXR and the ways that we're trying to center these tools as an opportunity for revolution, as an opportunity for liberation. So I'm going to talk just a little bit more about just our MTF programs and how we support artists through this before inviting our first artist up to talk a little bit about her work. So MTFXR, this is our program, and it's an access, development, and education program that we started about 6 years ago. It was Brandon's desire to build this bridge between artists and technologists to prepare artists and support them for the world that we're living in. It also was inspired by his own needs as a performance artist creating in XR. And he recognized that there was a big gap missing in terms of the development for this work, preparing artists to even understand what these tools are and be equipped to use them. One of the biggest things that he always says is that, like, we can be fearful about them and then just never engage them, but then we're not actually creating agency within ourselves to be at the table, to have ethical conversations and considerations about how it's used. And so this program is actually about bridging that gap and having people understand what they are so that people can make their own ethical considerations about how they choose to employ it to deepen the work. So we follow a kind of little process where if an artist is interested in technology, they'll go on what we call an XR date with Brandon, which is really just them showing up in a room and Brandon introduces them to a whole bunch of technology, a whole bunch of different experiences, just to give them a sense of the scope of the world. Sometimes an artist is coming in and being like, I'm really curious about, this musical, I wanted to have like a hologram, and like that's the language that they have access to. And Brandon's like, well, let's unpack what that language is and what that looks like. And is that what you actually want? Let's give you lots of examples of it so that you can decide for yourself how technology can be a dramaturgical tool to deepen your story. We then also have a program called Realms of Innovation. Once an artist has gone on an XR date and they say, yeah, I want to play with this technology in this way, via sound or movement or choreography or composition, then we will give the artist a sandbox opportunity to experiment with the question that they have about the work itself. This then, we also have what we call our XR Garage, which also has turned into a summit, which has become a conference. But this is where teams of artists, musical theater creators, plus creative technologists, plus students come together to build new experiential prototypes, just to understand what it means to build it together and build relationships across those disciplines. And this happens over the course of 5 days. And then that work will ultimately potentially lead to opportunities for co-producing the work, where we're trying to leverage the relationships with other organizations, institutions, to garner resources to help advance the work further. So that was a mouthful, but I wanted to do the framing before we really dove in. So at this time, I want to invite up one artist who has actually been working with us at the very beginning of our MTFXR program. I want to invite up Inyosi. Inyosi is going to take a moment on the harmonium to kind of clear the space, but also ground us for the conversation. We tell musical stories, so there's no way we wouldn't have music present in this experience. This Inyosi, we actually worked with her on a piece called Chronicle X, which is a piece actually that was made before Priestess Portals, and it was performed at the Shed, where we utilized augmented reality, AR, to create a theatrical metaphor for Diamond Reynolds going live on Facebook for the murder of Philando Castile. And so this was kind of a great example of the ways we were using technology as a dramaturgical tool, and folks were using their phones as a portal to be able to see more of the story. So at this moment, I'll invite Inyosi to come up, and I'll also invite audiences to get yourself cozy. Both feet on the floor, if you wouldn't mind. We're just gonna ground ourselves for a moment. Inyosi is someone who deals a lot with spiritual technologies. So we're taking a moment to just kind of ground ourselves in our bodies and in our breath. So at this moment, I'll just invite folks, if they would like, to close their eyes while we listen to this music, or you can just create a soft gaze. And you're just gonna ground yourself. You can also place your hands either palm down if you need to ground, or palms up if you need to receive some more energy tonight. Thank you, Inyosi. So this time I'm going to invite Inyosi up to first just share a little bit about the work that she's been creating, and then we'll get an opportunity to experience a little taste of the work before inviting our next artist up.
Hi, everyone. Greetings. Thank you, Brisa.
Of course.
So as you just heard, the work that I am exploring is called Priestess Portals. It's an outgrowth of a previous work, which is called Priestess of Twerk, a Black Femme Star Temple. And that work had three components. The first was the component of divination, which folks may be familiar with tarot. It's a more mainstream, popularized form of divination, but you can divine with anything, with books, with shells, with clouds, with water, right? And so divination was a major component. You'll get to experience a small taste of that. There were 7 chambers that folks could be placed inside of when they experienced the live work. But the divination itself took place using XR technology. The second component was a ritual opera. That ritual opera was inspired by the story of Isis or Aset's journey to the underworld. And so it was very much about re-embodying this ancient sacred story where this goddess has to meet her shadows and the shadows of trauma, the shadows of colonialism, the shadows of all that we have up against us as a Black femme, and to surpass, to rise up again and be reborn. That was a ritual opera. And how folks moved through that ritual opera was determined by the divination that they received at the outset of the experience. And then the third component are what are called chamber experiences. When you receive the divination, you are placed inside of one of 7 chambers that determines essentially the group that you'll travel with inside the piece and the thing that is coming up for you in your life, and why perhaps you are coming to see the work in the first place. So Priestess Portals, an outgrowth of Priestess of Twerk, all of it, I should have started by saying, is really coming out of these very lived experiences of denigration as a Black femme, and really craving and needing to experience spatially and in an embodied way a temple, a sacred place where my own presence and where our bodies, our presences, our spirits, our ancestors, our traditions were held up, were honored, uplifted, and deemed sacred. And how can we use any technology at our disposal, from our ancient technologies of our songs, our dances, our stories, but then also some of these immersive new technologies for that same purpose. So Priestess Portals, one of the things that didn't get as much attention as I had envisioned, as I desired in the premiere, because production timelines in theater are really constructed to create a show and a certain kind of experience. And so I was craving much more of like an atemporal, almost timeless sensibility, and that required me to think outside of the production itself. And so the portals themselves are experiences that are focused on touring one chamber to different cities, one chamber at a time, and which chamber is decided by divination. And that space would receive a number of activations that have to do with building community, archiving Black femme stories, creating sacred encounters, rituals, and experiences with the natural world of that place, and also receiving the stories of that place to then co-create with the folks, with the land. Experiences that are really memorable, really healing, and that folks can take with them, as well as that we can grow with and take with us as we grow this archive. And so one of the ways I'm really interested in activating this technology is in creating Black Femme archives for the various areas that we are looking at. There are 7 chambers, as I mentioned. I often fail at reciting all 7 of them in one sitting, but they are birth, death, erotica warrior, dream, voice, and inner child, and I always miss one. So there's the mystery. And so for any one of you that wants to try, we have 7 cards up here, and I would invite you to come up and experience a tiny piece of what you would have experienced before you received your ticket to the show, and which would have determined your pathway. Would anyone like to come up? Yeah, come on. Come sit next to me. Yeah, come sit next to me. Yay. What's your name?
Lindsay.
Hi, Lindsay. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Okay, so just take a deep breath. And these are the cards, and I want you to just rub your hands together. Yeah, and think about what you want to know or what you want this to respond to. And then just run your left hand over the pile as slowly as you want and choose which one calls to you. Beautiful. Warrior erotica, folks. Okay, beautiful. So if you would turn to the screen, you'll see what you would have experienced.
You can come out now. Out of the hole, out of the shell, out of the cave. You can crack open. I know it hasn't always been safe. I know there are lion parts of you that have been punished for their glory. I know you may not remember these parts, but I promise they are alive and well. Below the caves of moaning and the bony fingers reaching below the below, you are being invited into a process of awakening, of coming forth, of coming hither, of coming home. It takes a cold plunge to find and balance your inner heat. It takes boiling water to release the medicinal properties of leaves, roots, herbs, and bark. The medicine takes time to infuse itself into water or oil or alcohol. But after some time, the pods break and everything becomes fragrant. The medicine colors the water. You are the medicine in the water. And in the erotica warrior chamber, you must ask yourself where the imbalance lives in your life. Where are you boiling over with uncontained fire, raging in places it doesn't belong? Where are you lethargic and unable to find motivation, focus, and direction? Where are you too timid to step forth into your power? Where are you unwilling to see your truth, to feel your feelings? What are the undigested emotions that need attention? How is your stomach feeling, my love? It is undeniable, the sun you carry in your belly and in your eyes, my child. Open yourself to receive the teachings of the spiritual warrior that lives inside you. Welcome to the journey of the erotica warrior chamber. I can't wait to dance with you and call you by your name. I can't wait to hear you say, I am, and mean it. But first, we must travel. Until soon, my child.
Thank you so much, Inyosi, for sharing a bit about your project. We'll get a chance to talk about it after a little break. But before we do that break to reset, I want to introduce our next artist. I'd love to bring up EmmaLee Kidwell to talk about Come See Your Future. Can we all please welcome EmmaLee?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Brisa. It's such a joy to be here, especially after our 5 days in Miami together. I'm here without my writing partner, who is on vacation, but their name is Isabella Andreoli, and they are the composer that I work with and have had a long working relationship with. My name is EmmaLee Kidwell, and I'm a musical theater writer, and on this project I do the book and lyrics. Our piece is called Come See Your Future, and it is a hybrid live musical theater piece that integrates virtual reality, and it unfolds in a sci-fi dystopian world where Earth has been devastated by climate change, and the aristocracy escaped to a luxurious space station revolving around the planet while the rest of humanity is left behind. And it follows 4 friends who live on this space station, each who have their own relationships to power and privilege. And as political tensions are rising and their world, much like ours, is increasingly polarized and divided and marked by wealth inequality and differing ideology, all of these 4 friends are radicalized through their relationships with each other and the world, and are forced to think about whether or not they want to sit on their beds of privilege or join the revolution. And as the story unfolds, we understand maybe the agency that they have to change their future. So today we're sharing a piece from the show. It is in form a bit strange to share here because we both don't really have a vessel in a podcast to show you live theater or virtual reality. This piece, I guess I'll explain a little bit about where it falls in the show and what it is. So the show in form is much like a live musical that you would go buy a ticket to on Broadway. And then at certain points in the show, the audience is cued to go into headset and go into the first-person perspective of one of the characters on stage. So there's 4 actors in the play, and throughout the piece, the audience embodies each of these characters, seeing through their eyes, and even using hand tracking and interactive sequences being the character. And then as the audience comes out of headset, then the character is right there on stage and the play picks up. So you're really going in and out of these 2 forms in a way that is both in third-person perspective in our traditional stage setting, and also in the delightful ways that VR can put us in the first person. So this sequence today that we're sharing is called Coming Home, and it's a song that is a part of a virtual reality sequence. And since today we can't put you all in headset, although I would love to, and share our prototype, I have a little bit that feels a little bit like a radio play. So I'm gonna read you into this. So I would invite you all to go wherever your imagination feels most active, if that's with your eyes closed, if that's just looking down, if that's just looking at me, we're all here. But I'll read this, and then we'll listen to this song, Coming Home, which we just had the joy of recording with a dear friend of ours, and are hoping to release on streaming later this year. Imagine a world divided, a world ravaged by hurricanes made of metal and with floods from icebergs melting. Imagine a world where amidst the chaos, the starvation, and the conflict, those who have the means can buy their way out of humanity's collapse, living on a sleek spaceship, hovering above the dying earth. Imagine you are a young boy, Fernando, whose parents scraped together their last cents to send you to live on the ship, to give you the chance for a better life. You've grown up with the other half, paying for school by wearing a tuxedo and serving champagne on silver platters with white napkins while they lounge on their prized vintage furniture, on the leather couches they had shipped to the sky. Your head has been down and your work has been hard, and yet, when you attend a rare party, a pity invite perhaps, and try a new drug, destiny, that lets you see your future, you see your nightmare. Your father, sick and dying alongside the planet he lives on. There's no choice but to try to go home to see him, to see the family that has given you everything, yet you haven't seen in decades. You think of your sister who writes you letters that end up redacted, marked up in ink and restriction. Your mother who sends her love with words written in a language the ship does not speak any longer. And your father who you must say goodbye to. You commandeer a ship. You have a mission to complete. You are coming home.
Melting icebergs, toxic fumes, endless summer, nothing blooms. Going further, see firsthand where I come from, motherland. I'm coming home. I'm coming home. I'm coming home. Fire carving out the earth, rivers starving, mountains hurt. All the forests turn to ash, light the future like a match. Underwater cities burn, generations never learn. All our promise gone to waste. Who will save them? It's too late. It's too late. This isn't home. This isn't home. This isn't home. This isn't home.
Thank you so much, EmmaLee. Now you've gotten a chance to get a sense of both of these projects that we'll be in conversation about as we think about technology as a liberatory tool. We're going to take a really quick 5-minute break in between here to set up for the conversation. We're also going to sort of set up our microphones and all that. We're going to do our very best to stick to the 5. So if you need to run to the restroom, if you need to grab a drink or a snack, you got 5 minutes to do so. We'll see you back here soon. Thanks, everyone.
Hello, hello, hello. This is Ardai Knox, and I am Co-Executive Director of Musical Theater Factory, specifically the Director of Decolonization and Sustainability. And I am coming at you to remind you to subscribe to The Vibe. The Vibe is to get all of the information you could possibly desire about the Musical Theater Factory community. We let you know what our artists are doing in the world. We let you know what they're doing in our home, in our community base, and it has lots of tips and tricks and links to help you further your career, whether you're a director, an actor, a writer, or just an audience member who wants to stay plugged in. If you want to be tapped into all things amazing in New York, especially within NTF, subscribe to The Vibe.
Thanks, everyone. Welcome back. Really excited to dive into the conversation. So I want to take a moment to introduce our guests and then also have them talk a little bit about their work. And then we're going to get an opportunity to talk about each project with them. And then I'll invite both artists to be at the table. I'll offer a generative prompt for discussion, and then we'll get an opportunity to listen to them in dialogue with each other around technology as a liberatory tool. I want to also prepare you that there's going to be a moment after the discussion happens where I might clink my little glass, and it becomes an opportunity for you at any point to tap out any of the panelists up here to come and ask your own question or share a comment, and that will happen later on after we've gotten a chance to hear from everyone. Sound okay? Beautiful. Okay, so let's introduce our incredible guests. So we've got Aaron Santiago with us. Aaron is an XR new media artist based in New York City. Aaron has years of experience in XR, including live VR installations, performances, experiential VR work. Aaron's work has been shown internationally at New York Live Arts, Boston Cyber Arts, and The Shed. Aaron works across a wide range of technology with a cross-disciplinary practice of combining software engineering across a range of artistic mediums. Aaron's work is collaborative and hybrid, including websites, VR, AR, and computer sculpture. It's really great to have you here, Aaron.
Thanks for having me.
And woohoo! And then I'd love to introduce Dr. Cogburn. Dr. Cogburn directs a research group that uses innovative means to characterize and measure racism and evaluate its effects on mental and physical health. Associate Professor Courtney Cogburn employs a transdisciplinary research strategy to improve the characterization and measurement of racism and in examining the role of racism in the production of racial inequities in health. She's also conducting research exploring and the use of emerging technologies, including computational social science, to examine patterns of psychosocial effects of cultural racism and how virtual reality experiences can lead to changes in attitudes, social perception, and engagement. She's the lead creator of 1,000 Cut Journey, an immersive virtual reality racism experience. She also directs the Cogburn Research Group and co-directs the Justice, Equity, and Tech Laboratory at Columbia University. It's great to have you here. So let's just start by getting to know you both a little bit better, and then we'll chat a little bit first about Priestess Portals. So let's start with you, Aaron. I'm curious about what got you excited about the use of technology. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into this work?
If it wasn't clear, I wasn't prepared for that. I think I've been a lifelong gamer. It's like a strange entryway into this, but I think when I saw virtual reality, I saw like the Kickstarter for the original Rift CV1. If anyone remembers this was and I think what I had felt, and I couldn't really put it into words at the time, but what I had felt was a potential for embodied experience that just gave, I just like was like, oh, whoa, like it's not just buttons on a controller, I'm not controlling, like I am the person who can express my intent in this world. And I think just that concept alone had kind of just sent me on this journey to figure out what we could do with this technology.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Aaron. And Dr. Cogburn, curious the same. What got you into this work? Why does it feel important to you now?
Yes, I'm not a lifelong gamer, although I did play Sega back in the day. I was really frustrated with my empirical work. It wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. I was really struggling with translation. Spent 2 decades studying racism and its effects on health, and I was still spending too much time trying to convince people that racism was real, much to my chagrin. And so I started to think about, well, maybe it needs to be a visceral experience. People don't really understand what this is, how it feels in your body, how it exists in the world. It should be very obvious to everyone, right? I shouldn't have to create VR about racism, but I did, and found that it was quite effective at helping people connect in a way that was very, very different than my many research studies. And when I first proposed this project, I had never even had a headset on. It was very new to me, but I found the right collaborator and sort of blending our areas of expertise to try and think about what we could work on and produce together.
Thank you so much for sharing. I want to now turn it for a moment to Inyosi. The reason why this is one of the projects selected is because this work that you're doing is liberatory in that you are bringing communities together to heal using the knowledge, the ancestral knowledge of Black femme wisdom. And so I'm curious, how has technology informed your practice? You were one of those who went on an XR date with Brandon and now has gone on your own journey of using this technology, and I'm curious what that's been like for you and what it's meant.
Yeah, thank you. I was just reminiscing about that XR date on the way up here, because I really was not seeking out technology as a way to support my creative practice. It was something that, I don't really believe in that many accidents, and so it was something that through my relationship with MTF came to me. Literally, Brandon came to my apartment and during COVID, and we were masked, and I was exploring all of this technology, and we were having some very exciting and inspiring conversations about what might be possible at the time when I was working on Chronicle X, which Brisa explained really focalizes on the story of Philando Castile's murder, which Diamond Reynolds kind of documents through her phone. And so the phone was like this really activated thing for me at that time because I was working on this piece. And so as I was writing about what I call of sacred warriorship that she enacted through her phone, I was also exploring what imaginary possibilities, what healing potential might also be able to exist through that same portal inside which violence was witnessed. And so that's the question that really set me off on this journey. And, now I think with Priestess, it's still like very much nascent. Like, I feel like we're still, like, we started with this divination idea, and this is really just like maybe an iota of the idea that you experienced. And so we really are excited about the possibility of things like, creating divinatory experiences that are more interactive, right? Like here it like starts and ends, but actually, of course, the live component, you would then work with everything that came up at that time, but also how is that possible to experience virtually? I'm also really excited about the idea of creating, one of the things we've discussed is creating ritual experiences that are guided, but where we are not necessarily physically present, and that feels really exciting. One has to be really careful with these things because with spiritual knowledge and ancestral technologies, it's really easy to kind of get in over your head without kind of an embodied person present to support you, especially if you're dealing with trauma or anything of that nature. but exploring questions around making some of these ancestral technologies that would have otherwise, had it not been for colonialism, racism, etc., all the things, interrupted those things that would have been passed down. How might technology support us in being able to extend access? I didn't have my first divination till I was in grad school, you know, with an Ifa priestess. And while nothing would replace that live experience, there is perhaps something that technology can do around creating a stepping stone towards that live experience.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I'd love to turn it over to Erin or Dr. Cogburn just to reflect on Priestess Portals. This is also your introduction to the work, so there may be questions. What struck you, or what stuck with you, or what questions are emerging as you experience a little bit of what this piece is about? This is for either of you.
Yeah, I mean, we started talking a little bit, and I was really curious about how divination emerged through the technology for you, right? So I just met you, but I have a sense that if it did not emerge, you would not be doing it, right? And so there was something that kept you here and engaging. So I was really curious about how that emerged for you. And my work has also turned to, thinking about the health benefits of imagination. So when you're talking about being in an imaginary space and the healing potential, I think it's really so powerful. And it's not the way people think about these technologies. And an argument I make is that it's not necessarily the technology, it's the user, it's the person creating. And I think you discover really powerful things when you bring people to technology who may not otherwise use it, and what they discover and what they find, like you, I think can be potentially really powerful. And I would argue if certain people are the only people creating and using the technologies, we'll get the most boring version of what's possible with those things. So anyway, I was really excited to learn more about your work.
Thank you.
The spiritual, like what kept you're considering the possibility of divination, you're considering the possibility of spiritual expression using the technologies. What did you experience that kept you engaged?
Yeah. This is going to sound funny, but like what's keeping me in this moment is like, as a maker and as a creator, like it takes time to know a thing, and so I feel like I'm in the process. What's keeping me engaged is the learning. Like what's keeping me engaged is like, my fascination with this potential for imagination to be healing. I resonate with so much of what you shared. And, one of the things that I started saying when I first started with XR in the last project was that like Black folks like deserve some like reparative imagination. Like there's so much that we're all like, imagine a better world, like all of this imagination that's like put on our backs, and also a world that's profiting off of our imagination constantly. And so this was like, here, take this like glorious thing,
you don't have to fix anything.
you don't have to fix anything. You can like receive it, and it's like beautiful, and it comes, and it's endemic to us. Like it comes from our indigenous knowledge, and like here you get to see in one of the scenes, folks. So what I was saying about like, how could the phone, which someone has experienced violence, also become the portal for healing? So there's a moment when the whole audience lifts up their phone, and through the phone they can see ancestors dancing in the stars, like throughout the whole space. And so it's like, here, take this beautiful experience. Like, remember that we are eternally alive, and that we are the technology that is supposedly being sold to us. And so. Yeah, I think moments like that keep me engaged. And then also like it was a very, very potent moment. You could feel it in the room, and I was like, oh yeah, like this can work. This can work. Because the first time I was like, can this work? And then after Chronicle X, I was like, this can work. I don't feel like we've, I feel like right now we're in the moment with Priestess Portals where we're doing that weaving of like, what are those moments that we're creating?
Yeah, still finding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really curious about those moments actually, because Brendan and I are friends, good friends, and I was actually lucky enough to see a really, really early build of Priestess Portals when we were discussing, I don't know, some like technical constraints, like how do we choose the experience in the virtual headset? Anyway, I feel like I need to express to the audience like how different characteristically it is to, pick the card and then go into your own, like what feels like perfectly personalized experience, like that no one else can see, this shared moment of intimacy with the divination process. I think it's just so beautifully represented by the technology. We always have to like fight against the isolation of virtual reality, but it like makes a lot of sense in this use. So I was curious, like what led you to this format, or if there are other things you're exploring, or what that process looks like for you.
Yeah, you really named a lot of what drew me in, and I'm glad that experiencing it in like beta, even, that you were able to experience that. Certainly, the intimacy aspect was lost in this experience. But there is something that can happen, I feel like, when you have enough scaffolding, like enough support. I mean, before someone even got the divination, there was a whole like introduction around like go to a room, go sit on a pillow, get some tea, like, drink some water, like really how to support folks in the moment. I think, the moments matter a lot, but it's actually, to me, like the scaffolding around the moments where the art has to also kind of, and the, social and spiritual responsibility aspect has to come in. But I was really just wanting to see how technology could support us in creating that live, embodied moment that's very intimate, that's very precious, that's very sacred, a moment where you feel like you've been seen, but you don't know who's seeing you. And technology is kind of like that in some scary ways. But in ways also that I'm really compelled by, because that's also how spirit sees. Like, we're being seen all the time, but we can't see what's seeing us. And that for me feels like, this little nice, this little place where they come together. Because for me anyway, I believe it's all spirit. Like, I believe that it's all spirit. Our imaginations are spirit. The minerals are spirit. And so, like, I'm really excited by creating work that emphasizes that meeting place.
Thank you. I'm going to take a moment to invite EmmaLee up so we can do the same thing, which is just reflect on what struck you or what stuck with you, any questions that came up, and then I'll invite both artists to come to the table. I'll ask a question and allow you to be in dialogue, and we'll end with an opportunity for audience members to jump into the combo. So we're going to dive straight in. Curious from either of you, reflections, responses, questions about this proposal that EmmaLee and Maria have for this hybrid musical.
So how are you thinking about, not everything needs to scale, but how do you reach as many people as you want to reach with this sort of format, is my first question. And my second question is more about your team. You mentioned your partner in creation of the music, but I'm curious, you're talking about different sort of positionalities, relationships with power and privilege. So who on your team is helping to craft those narratives, in addition to your partner you mentioned?
Yeah, thank you. In regards to scale, I think that's one of our biggest questions right now and explorations. And that was something that we really went into our 5 days in Miami to learn about. So there's a few, I guess, technical challenges when we start talking about scale. The first is syncing all the headsets together. So that just in and of itself can be a bit of a challenge, although there are people who are doing it, and that's been very exciting to watch them forging ground in putting a lot of headsets on the same track through the story together at once. And then even when you start talking about the visuals being synced together, Then do you want to do sound in headphones? Do you want to do sound in the room? There really is kind of an endless list of questions that you have to start answering about how we can put even 100 people into headset at once. But that is the goal, I think, is to be able to put, not just one person into headset, obviously, at once. Theater is a communal experience, and I think it's really inspiring talking about the individuality and the isolation that VR can provide, and I do think that is a big aspect of the show, is feeling a personalization with the character while also experiencing something collectively at the same time. That's why the hybrid form excites us so much. But right now we're looking to build a prototype of the whole show. So right now we have 2 VR prototypes. There's 6 current VR sequences. And the next step is to be able to do a fully staged lab where we'll prototype out all 6 of the sequences. We were lucky to have a sandbox opportunity with Musical Theater Factory. Gosh, that was a couple of years ago now, where we explored the transitions of what it is to do a theater scene into VR and then back into theater. And it worked really well. Honestly, I think a lot better than we thought it was going to go. And so I think that the question then becomes getting really clear about how can we get large groups of people to understand when it's time to go into headset. Onboarding the audience is a big thing. So we're hoping to maybe partner with universities or with developing partners to explore scaling it bit by bit and grow the piece slowly so that we can control that. And then as for collaborators, I think what's beautiful, so my writing partner and I have been writing together for going on 7 years or so, and we create the story together and really collaboratively despite working in slightly different mediums. And we've relied heavily on Brandon to guide us in terms of the tech creation, and then in terms of the story also on dramaturgy and the resources that Musical Theater Factory has provided and with the community. And so even at roundtable readings and bringing in dramaturgs and audience members with perspectives unlike our own, because it's so important in a story about differing perspectives to bring in people. But also I think it's exciting that the team isn't finished being crafted yet, so we're still looking for a dramaturg and a director to work on the piece maybe long term, who share intersections of social justice and advocacy, and who can really help us shape those parts of the story. So I think it's been collaborative already, and we're looking to deepen those collaborations in the future.
Both of these pieces that we saw today, I think, are tied together by something I really, really first noticed thinking about what you're doing, which is that that this technology lets us play in reality in a way that sort of like lets us escape the confines of a medium. I don't know if I'm making too much sense, but I think you feel it a lot when we talk about VR and theater, because theater is a very medium entrenched medium. No shade. But I think kind of the beauty, the metaphor of the headset being a drug is awesome. It's also a classic thing. I feel like we always talk about oh, you're taking a trip to the. It's how we make it make sense for people. But I think more so what it represents for me is the necessity or the impetus of the message itself is get out. We need you as the audience to move beyond the proscenium, because this stuff that we're talking about is serious business, right? It's not oh, we're gonna watch a show and there's gonna be this defensive wall between you and the work, but it's you're in my world now, for lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to get that out there.
Yes.
It's good stuff.
And I think too that as we were citing the ways that healing and community are a way that liberation is present in Inyosi's piece, that idea of being able to embody the first person perspective of folks in this story also feels like an opportunity for liberation. And this is where I kind of open it up to all 4 of you. I want to really talk about this provocative notion that theater too can be a liberatory tool, but technology as a liberatory tool. Is it? How is it? What are the challenges or contradictions even within that concept. And I'm curious for you all to just have a moment. We'll maybe take something like 5 minutes just between the four of you to wrestle with what that means. Does it resonate with you or not? So I'll invite Inyosi to take my seat.
Brisa, it makes me think about something you said to me a few days ago when we were talking about specifically AI, but also tech in general. And you said to me, well, a machete is a tool, and it can be used to cut grass or it can be used to kill someone. And it is all in how it's used. And I think that, I guess I would just start off in stating my opinion that I do think that technology can be a liberatory tool. I think it's in how it's wielded. And I think that the intention of the artist and the people who are behind it matters deeply.
Yeah, I have a sort of funny story about that. Actually, like, I did a piece recently at a tea festival downtown, and they asked me to make an immersive experience. So I wanted to like create something out of the idea of like a tea leaf reading. Used AI to like read the tea leaves and generate a thing, but I felt like, you know, it needed some grounding or depth in something. So I sort of like, what I now realize, haphazardly invoked a bunch of divination practices. So I took all of the I Ching, all of astrology and all of tarot, and jammed it into the like reading generator. And what I found is that it was way too powerful. Genuinely, like I had some like experiences where I saw people, I affected them to their core. Like some people like walked out wordlessly, nearly in tears. Some people were like, "Oh my God, how'd you know?" I later. This was like a year later, I went to Hawaii for a residency, and I met someone who had seen the piece and was convinced by it to move to Hawaii. That's, you know, there's a much longer story in one sentence, but yeah, so I think exactly to what you're saying, even outside of the bounds of software technology, it's like this kind of technology is also like something to be, you know, not trifled with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think that what I'll add is that it's also important, not just the users. So sometimes we think about liberation as it relates to marginalized, oppressed communities as the users, and I think they need to be engaged at all phases. So the creations of the technology, the critiques of the technologies, etc. So I think it's not just on the back end that's important. So I agree that it depends on who's wielding it. And I think my question to you, Emma, was about the teams. I think the people designing it become very critical. Even with our best intentions, we can miss things depending on our own perspectives. And so spending a lot of time thinking about who's in conversation with us about what we're trying to create, I think becomes really critical as well. And the last piece I'll add is about onboarding and offboarding. It's a big issue that comes up. So our experience puts you into the shoes of a Black male experiencing racism as a child, an adolescent, and as an adult. I mean, we had to be very careful about how we thought about representing that. We had to be very careful that it didn't feel like a game or entertainment in any way. And we quickly ran into the issue of what do you do with people when they come out of that headset, either crying in the headset or after they left. Our project happened to be run by social workers, right, who can spot, like, no, you need to come have a chat with me for a second. But when you're not there, when you're scaling, you don't always have the tea and the care that goes into like really curating this space. And sometimes it now just exists in the world. So how you care for people coming in and leaving the headset or the experience becomes really critical to consider as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I can add to all of that. I tend to really resonate with what everyone shared. Maybe I will just say that, like, I think it really is bringing, I think, yes, certainly technology can be liberatory, and I also don't like to think of technology as like only belonging to the folks in power, meaning like only coming from, created by, and innovated by the folks in power, because that's just not accurate. Right now we're dealing with some very expensive technologies that, power certainly mediates, but all we have to do is think about hip hop and the way that some kids in the Bronx found some equipment and created a revolution, a sonic revolution that we're still that we all have been affected by in some way, shape, or form. And we can understand that technology can and has always in some way belonged to the people, because the people are the ones that have the creative spark. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about what can happen when this is in all of our hands. And also, to the point of critiquing the way things are being done, I'm also really excited for how practices around Mother Earth and the environment and the impact, the ecological impact of technology can be re-envisioned with indigenous communities and with communities that are often on the other side of the end of the decision making, to try to be more responsive and to have our usage be in some way like in relationship with the impact of our usage. So I feel like those are ways for me that come up that maybe haven't been stated explicitly. Is just this idea that we are in relationship, and that with better relationships, better technology is created.
Mm-hmm. I want to dive into one specific aspect for us to dive a little bit deeper into, and I also want to acknowledge that this is the point where at any point you can tap me out if you want to ask a question, if you want to name a comment. But I really want to, this is actually my question. Brandon's texting me right now saying, I would love to hear folks dive into the concrete ways to ensure the tool is wielded responsibly. What is the advice that any of you all might give to folks who are new to the space around how to think about that?
I'll jump in, just to not be driven by fear, right? So too often I see people put their head in the sand and think that sounds like an awful thing. They only believe, the headline that they read. They haven't truly engaged with it. And I think it's difficult to disrupt something you don't understand. And so you have to engage and think about it. That doesn't mean you use it. That doesn't mean you integrate it into your work. But I do think paying attention, if you don't, it will be very easy, right, for people to design our futures for us. I had an example with one of my students where they're in the middle of this Israeli-Palestine conflict on campus. And I was saying that there are people in the world who set those fires, and they would love for you to keep focused on that and never engage with the designing of the future. Don't let them do that. So I think your engagement is a critical component.
Thank you for that. Any other thoughts? How to wield it responsibly?
My thought is in relationship to AI and a lot of the conversations we were having in Miami this week, which is that, candidly, I went into the 5 days in Miami knowing that there was going to be a lot of conversation about AI, and that there, I think, is a lot of dialogue in general about how we should or should not feel about AI. And I was excited to go in and hopefully gain a more nuanced opinion about it in relationship to artistry, because as an artist, I think there's a lot of fear in a lot of our hearts about the role that AI will play in the arts over the course of the next few years and beyond. But something that I was really inspired by was seeing that there are people on the forefront of creating, not like, I think the dialogue that they were saying, or like the words that they used, were they don't want to be a police of AI use, but empowering artists with the tools to understand if their like generative AI images that they're coming up with are derivative from artists that have already created the work. And so that we can be more responsible in, if you're creating a pitch deck or a prototype of something and there's no budget to employ an artist, because I do think that it is important to continue employing artists, but that if it is an opportunity where AI or generative AI specifically might enter the practice, for us to also understand protecting artists and the IP that is already out there, and people have not necessarily been super responsible with how the data that goes into that has been put together, but I do think that we can be responsible on our end about how we use it and holding our communities accountable, I guess. And I was excited to hear that people are on the forefront of trying to do that.
Ask a question. I don't have to come up there.
We would love it because it helps with the audio recording. Thank you. Can we give a round of applause?
But it's to you.
Oh, okay. I'll draw that in.
Okay. This may seem like a very elementary question, but I was fascinated how you were describing your project. And when you're speaking of these, and this is more of a technical question, but when you're speaking of these headsets, you mean virtual headsets completely, audio and visual. So you said that you were just describing scene, then VR, and then scene. And I'm just going to ask you to describe that a little clearer for my brain, and how the VR figures out. And you said when you put the VR on, it changes. It's from your perspective. How does that figure that out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are still exploring exactly what the transitions look like, but take the song that we just listened to, Coming Home. So there's a scene before that where that character Fernando goes to their friend Anna's apartment, and they tell them that I need to go home to see my family. You know, I have this urgency. And so there's a scene that Anna's helps them acquire the tools to be able to do that. And then as Fernando sits down in this spaceship chair to embark on this journey to Earth, we're exploring a mix of visual and auditory cues. So a lighting shift, the same musical motif might play, and then we've been experimenting maybe with a countdown timer on screen. So the audience will have their headsets in their lap the whole time. And so part of the onboarding process, like you were talking about, helps teach the audience that every time I hear this music and the lighting changes like this and there's a countdown timer, that means it's time to go into VR. So then the audience puts on their headset. We're still exploring whether or not the sound will be in headphones or in room, but then you put on your headset and suddenly you're seeing through Fernando's eyes and are in the spaceship with you are Fernando. You can see vast space. Yes.
Everybody
becomes Fernando.
I understand.
And then we all go on Fernando's trip to Earth, and we see firsthand the devastation of climate change. We see the forest burning. We see all of these things. And then Fernando, in that particular sequence, has to get an object for their friend Anna. And so we're incorporating some hand tracking. So there's even a thing where they have to like pull some levers to get this. So the audience in their seat is pulling levers. And then there's the object. They reach out, grab the object, and then as they grab it, mixed reality. So pass-through is a thing that headsets can do, where the cameras of the headset can see the world around you. So it would fade from the virtual environment that you've been in into pass-through, where you're then seeing the stage in front of you, and the character, the actor who plays Fernando, is then on stage with the object that you just grabbed in virtual reality. And then the scene takes off as it was.
Just a practical question, though. Isn't that incredibly expensive to think of this hardware that it's not just like headphones, like going to the theater and getting, if you need to have audio assistance, but this is pretty complicated and expensive.
I really want to jump in on this one.
Yeah, please.
I'm an artist, but I also work as a studio manager at Onassis Onyx. We're like a studio that manages a ton of artists who do this kind of work with emerging technology headsets or not installations. A big thing that I always say and comes up a lot in these conversations is that if you think about what the practical equivalent for this kind of work would be, you would see that the costs are like incomparable. Like how do you teleport every person individually into an isolated space without them getting up? Like how do you allow them to interact with things that are in front of you? Like we might see that with something like the Sphere, but that's like tens, hundreds of millions of dollars that it's not making enough money to make itself go. So like a lot of these technologies really like, yes, the cost of staffing and cost of headsets sometimes might feel like a lot up front, but the kinds of things that you can create like effectively become free. Like you might have to program a door, but you don't have to buy one. Like you don't have to buy a table. You don't have to create the scene in real life and ship it and do these kinds of things. Make sure it works all, mechanically, things like that. So I think just in that question, cost-wise, we're seeing like it's a little bit more in this way, but it's completely a different universe in a whole different direction.
Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm getting a text from Brandon here, which is saying that another point to this is also that the tech companies need our great ideas to support this kind of work. And so something that I think was really present when we went to the conference was just how unique theater was at the intersection of all the disciplines present. There were other musical theater pieces, but not as many as you might see at the intersection of other disciplines. I also feel like we built relationships with individual people who have access to the gear because they're working for a tech company that has access, for example, to hundreds of headsets. And so partnership then becomes essential for making something like this possible. But the question is really valid and very, very real. As we find a way to wrap up this part of the conversation, we're going to end with an activity that we all do briefly together. I just want to hold space for one last comment, any sort of takeaways or offerings that each of you have for the audience as we wrap this conversation. And I'll turn that to any of you all.
I'll start. I think VR often gets linked to empathy. And I think it is a lane that is far too narrow. That first-person point of view can be very powerful, but I've also found that it can be very powerful to see and understand yourself using the technology and not only trying to understand other experiences or trying to connect with other people's emotions. So in our piece around racism, it's a Black male, but what I'm asking you to do, it's targeting white liberals, for you to understand who you are and how you're related to the thing that you're observing. You are not absent from what you're seeing. It's not just that person's experience. And so I think really playing around with perspective and embodiment and moving beyond empathy and maybe thinking about competency and self-awareness are also really powerful for us to consider with these tools.
I think just in response to sort of like the breadth of understanding for the technology that exists in this world, there's this thing that I always have to say every talk I do, which is like, make art now. Like we're at a point in technology where as creatives we get to benefit from a bunch of companies completely spinning their gears on things that may or may not work out, but it gives us so much opportunity as creatives for free. It's to play. It's awesome. Mm-hmm. It's awesome. Like, it's not like, oh, the construction company like built that venue and it's only for these. It's like, no, we have VR headsets, we have AI, we have augmented reality on our phones. Like, web technology is incredible, and it's been built out by an entire industry that like doesn't affect us. You know, like we're not like infringing on them in any way. So
they don't even know it's possible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Like, so like right now is a phenomenal time to be in this space, making things happen.
Final thought for me, I think, is related to the first comment, which is really like, how can we take a tool that has been created for us to check out and completely escape reality as a way to check in both to this 3D reality, but also to the multi-dimensional reality that we each have inside of us, the universe that each of us is. How can we use it to remember things that have otherwise been forgotten? And yeah, as a tool for really deep self and beyond self, ancestral, spiritual inquiry. That's what really excites me. And I believe that is quite liberatory.
That was really beautiful. I mean, I completely resonate with everything that everybody said here. I think that even as we talk about the financial model of how we build pieces like these, a lot of really innovative works might not live at the Gershwin. And I think it's important for us to, as we are open-minded about how technology can enter our practice and change the art form, about the kinds of venues and collaborations and partnerships, like you were saying, that we can evolve our medium with. And I think that now there's so many different ways to experience art, and I'm just excited to see the way that theater continues to evolve outside of a 2,000-seat proscenium theater and into experiences that we can all identify with and find really deep meaning in.
I just want to take a moment for us all to thank all of these incredible guests. And we're going to end with a little activity, a little collective meaning making that you all in small groups will make together. Here is the task. We did this at our first live taping. We're going to create, very simply, a collective poem. And here's how this is going to happen. I would love for 3 folks in our audience to volunteer to write down words and phrases that come up for your small group as it pertains to thinking about technology as a liberatory tool. Let's make our little manifesto together. And with the folks around you, you are just going to generate words and phrases. And the person who's scribing is just going to kind of put them in an order, and we'll have them sit here at the mic and read our little poem that we've created just with words and phrases in response to thinking about technology as a liberatory tool. Just gather up next to folks in these 3 groups, and we'll come back together in a couple minutes. Go on ahead.
Transformative contradiction and original plagiarism. Freaky revolutionary knowledge and uncomfortable discomfort. A complex personal investment, overwhelming empathy. Answer the call.
Technology is grounding, expressive, and holistic. Technology is scary and exciting. Technology has a rippling effect. It's resource intensive, and it's inevitable.
Embodied interactive meaning making. Access is isolated but connected. At the heart, now is the time to make art.
Thank you so much. This has been Fast Forward. I'm Brisa Areli Munoz, and it's been such a joy to talk about technology as a liberatory tool. Thank you all so much, and have a beautiful evening.
Hey there, it's Ardite Knox, Co-Executive Director of Musical Theater Factory, specifically Director of Decolonization and Sustainability, and I am here to remind you that if anyone's got us, we got us. In this time of chaos and insanity, invest in the community that is investing in you. Invest in the We Got Us Fund, a new initiative by MTF to make sure that every single member of our community is not getting paid just a living wage, is not getting paid in exposure, is not getting paid in promises, but it's getting paid a thriving wage. Yeah, you heard me, a thriving wage. Help us ensure that everyone in your community, everyone in our community is able to not just live, but thrive. Invest in the We Got Us Fund today.
Hey everyone, I'm Fallon, and thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Fast Forward. I am on the MTF staff as the coordinator of connectivity and systems. And if you want to stay tuned in, please like, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss future episodes, upcoming releases, and live tapings. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.